Your favorite artists, new music discovery, candid conversations, unfiltered, loudmouth, little lady, lots of music history. Broadcasting live from New Jersey, it's the Carr Stereo Podcast with Terrie Carr.
Hey, it's Terrie Carr, and this is the Carr Stereo Podcast. Welcome back for another episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave me some comments too. I just love those. Busy stuff coming up. Next week's episode, I am live at Catfight Coffee in Boonton, New Jersey with Daryl DMC McDaniels. You don't want to miss it. We're launching another cast this Friday on the release day of the new Black Swan record with Black Swan vocalist Robin McCauley, and we're breaking down some tracks. This week, though, I am so excited to share a deep dive conversation I had with White Lion frontman Mike Tramp. Mike takes us back to the early days. He talks openly about the band's demise, record company problems, and how he's keeping the White Lion legacy alive today. I first interviewed Mike Tramp over 30 years ago, and I'll tell you, getting back together with him was like no time has gone by. 30 plus years later, the Carr Stereo Podcast. Excited to welcome the one and only White Lion's Mike Tramp.
I feel like we never left each other from 35 years ago.
The love is still there.
We just picked up where we left off. I am with Mike Tramp from White Lion. So happy to have you live. Fun memories. Everybody was just so positive. Like, oh, I met Mike here. Oh, I remember I have my Lemoore shirt on because I remember seeing the band, White Lion, taking the stage at Lemoore. And you weren't even like, it wasn't MTV-ish yet. There was just the buzz. We got the buzz back then.
Well, that was all about, like a lot of times when you talk about the 80s was that the audience was as much engaged with this movement as the bands was, and that's why it made it possible that you actually could go out and play in a club that had a guarantee of maybe 350 to 750 audience in there,
And a full rock show. Like these bands were doing these full-on rock shows, and I remember my first impression was, oh my God, these guys are rock stars, because you led that charge. You were like the guy. You were the rock star.
Well, I mean, we were under that impression that when you take the stage, you perform. You don't just stand there and sing the song. So the show was obviously like on the same level as the music. And that's, of course, a lot what the 80s were about in that way.
Let's talk about you, because you said, look, when we get on stage, we perform. But do you ever have a memory of not performing? Because Mike Tramp, for those of you who may not know, was a teen idol back in Denmark when he was 15-ish in a band called Mabel. And as you said, we were kind of like the Bay City Rollers were back then. You were in all the magazines and everybody knew who you were. And I look at some of the footage from
Why did you do that?
Because I wanted to rewind, but I will tell you, you were still so polished as a kid. Who polished you up like that, Mike Tramp, as a kid?
Well, that's a great question, and let me see if I can answer it quickly. I mean, after school, I was working without getting paid for a guy who were running all the Tiger Beats or the circus magazines in Denmark, and he fed me daily all the English bands, because Denmark was still way behind, where all the bands that came out of England at that time: Slade and Sweet, Gary Glitter, Queen, David Bowie, like the real loud glam of the 80s, of the 70s. And that's what I was getting fed before I got back home to my mom to get fed, So what I said earlier on, this thing about getting on stage. So when you look at Freddie Mercury and when you look at David Bowie, I mean, they didn't walk on stage with pants sacking down their ass. They walked out there like, total performers and never stepped out of that character. So I grew up with that from the start, that when you take the stage, you have stage clothes on and you perform and all that kind of stuff, along with that there's music behind you. And I've just taken that along with me since then. And I remember when I arrived with me, see, a lot of people don't know the story. When I arrived in New York in the summer of 82, that was with Mabel. But by the time we went through immigration, we have changed the name to Lion. And we were playing the circuit clubs, and including Lemoore's, Fibbery's on Long Island in Queens, or Cheers over there. So we had a chance to to hook up with some of those bands that were also the beginning of the 80s in New York and Jersey.
And the Mabel guys left and went back, right? And you stayed.
Well, yeah, I mean, we ran out of money and things like that. But, to me, it was just a matter of finding a couch or a bed to sleep in and so and so. And I was willing to sacrifice myself for that.
And then you met Vito. And then that brotherhood of music kind of formed. Who do you meet first? You meet Vito first?
Well, at the end of 82, we had played L'Amour's. It was our first time we played L'Amour's. And that night, you remember the bands always used to go on very late.
People would pick you up to go to L'Amour. My friend would be like, I'll be at your house. And we lived far. I'll be there at 11.
Exactly.
At 11.
Yeah, we used to go on at like 1 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're sitting, me and the rest of the Danes are sitting in the dressing room, and at that, Vito walks in. I mean, of course, this is just any guy walking in, but, he's got the sunglasses on. It's the midnight, the guitar's dangling out of his guitar case. He's got the long hair and the cigarette. And I thought to myself, man, what a jerk, And we had these little rehearsal room amps that our bass player had built, and Vito just looks at it. He says, "Oh, man, can I try one of those?" And I says, "Yeah, let him make a fool out of himself," because I thought we were the shit.
Yeah.
And then for the next hour, we just sat there and looked at that guitar player.
Yeah.
Ripping through every solo we knew from all our favorite records. And then I said to myself, now, how do I get to send these guys home? Because obviously, this is the reason why I came here. Here's my ticket out of here. And shortly after we hooked up, and believe it or not, the first time Vito and I sat down and wrote music together, which was very, very shortly after that, we wrote Broken Heart and The Road to Valhalla, and it became sort of the foundation for what we were going to do. We already had that vision of what we were going to do.
When did you know you could be a songwriter? Because you can be somebody who delivers, you can be in a great image-based band growing up as a teen idol, but when did you know that you had a knack for writing songs, not just writing songs, but writing songs that would connect with people?
Yeah, well, I mean, the last thing is I guess, it's just, hit or miss. But I already started writing songs when I was 16, when I got into my first band. And let me say this, I never had a plan of being in music. I always wanted to follow the road of sports in that, playing soccer in Europe. But once I stepped into this house with three, where the rest of the band were living, they were 10 years older than me, so they were already established. We had a studio, we had a PA system, we had a truck, we had a light system. I signed a deal for the rest of my life that this was what I was going to do. And then with time, I started writing songs, and they just came natural, and I've never, ever changed my songwriting process. I don't have a process. I take a guitar in my hand or a piano, and within the next 10, 15 minutes, I'm starting writing a song.
So the band gets signed, and then something happens with the first deal, and then moves on to the Atlantic Records
exactly.
Deal, right?
White Line out of a basement in Brooklyn, which was basically underneath the stage at L'Amour. And the band breaks in Japan first and go through Europe with the Fight to Survive album. And then, the local record stores would import the album. And bit by bit, our local following started knowing that we had an album. Meanwhile, we were number one in Kerrang in England, France, Germany, and starting getting a lot of movement in Japan. But meanwhile, I was painting houses down the Jersey Shore together with James Lomenzo. I mean, we were no different. And I've always said that, to anybody that want to put me higher than I should be. I'm a kid from the street. I've never lost that. I keep my feet on the street. I don't like that. I don't, the memories of White Lion playing Madison Square Garden is not as great as the memories of playing at Trocadero in Philly.
And that's why when you came here, you fit in so well. Because you kind of came to this area, the tri-state area, and you were a kid from the street, and you kind of fit in with all of those other kids from the street and had a vision, and you guys made it happen. I always say you can be a visionary. It doesn't work unless you're an executioner. You got to execute that vision.
You can't just do the talk. You got to do the walk, right?
Absolutely.
And I knew America was my destiny from the beginning.
I just remember when Wait came out, everything was all about this song you were on constantly. Did you know that this song would be the song that would just be the breaker of the band?
Well, I could say yes, and I can also say no, but I won't say no. We were in the rehearsal room, just Vito and I, and Vito started playing the intro. And the first word I sang was "wait." And it irritated me for a long time because there was no way I could get around it when I started, writing the lyrics. I said, man, why have I committed to this word as the opening word? And, of course, when we started, knocking the song out with the band and I recorded it on my little Sony Walkman and stuff like that, and Vito and I driving back to Staten Island in my little car and the stereo is cranked and it's distorted. We knew the song right there. So sometimes when you hear these or see these documentaries about record companies, there's no reverb on. A band knows if the song works right away. It's how it feels. And we knew in the car, we couldn't hear the kick drum, we couldn't hear that, but we knew the song was there. But from that moment on until that song would break, that would go 2.5 years.
Wow. Everybody looks back to the 80s and thinks they were the best of times. And in a way they were. But the blessings also came with the curses.
You got that right.
Record companies, and everybody always looks back to the 80s and says, but the times for the bands were so fun. And they were fun. Everybody had a great time. But the amount of pressure bands were under then. So you guys put out Pride. Pride comes out. Boom. Shot out of a cannon, baby. Wait and tell me. And When the Children Cry comes in, that's even like a whole other echelon of the success. Fan favorites, Lady the Valley, you guys are on tour with everybody, Aerosmith and Kiss and all these bands. It's craziness. So how quickly do they want you to follow that up with, of course, another Pride? And how fast do they say, guys, we gotta churn this out? That's what it was like then. And when you look at bands, like I look at somebody like Vito, who one day was just like, listen, I'm out. You can see how that happens to people. It doesn't mean that they loved what they did any less than somebody else. People are just all wired differently.
Man, you're leading off to a miniseries here, man. Not just like,
But
you got
I
that right.
imagine the pressure was exorbitant.
Let's start by saying to the listeners that a record company is a bank. They give you a loan, and for the next couple of years, they try to get that money back. That's all they are. They don't care about anything but the money they're making. But let's just stick with the story you say about following up the Pride. And first of all, they had almost given up on us when we released Wait. It took almost half a year to 3/4 of the year before that song broke, and they almost quit on us. Then there was one radio station in Minneapolis that played the song and got so much response, and it flooded the country. And from there on, then we go on the road. We go with Kiss, and then we get Aerosmith, we got AC/DC. We're playing for 25,000 people every night, and the band is doing well. The album is selling, and so on and so on. They did not want to release When the Children Cry. They did not like that song. Our managers fought for that song because the band wanted that song. Now, by the time we're done touring on Pride, we'd almost been on the road for 2 years. And like you said early on, no, we hadn't thought about anything. Only thing we knew in life was Pride and the set list we were playing. Then suddenly we get this call or the message, we need a new album. And the thing was, Vito and I and the rest of the band needed to put our hair in sort of like for half a year balsam, overnight mask for the hair, and just take a break away from each other. Yeah. We come back from the tour. 2 days later, Vito and I are in a motel room, deserted motel in Palm Springs, California. It's like a Tarantino movie. Writing the Big Game album in 1 week. It had taken us 2 years to write the Pride album. We had played the songs for all the local rock fans that knows the old days. We played those songs before we recorded the songs. So when we went in to record the Pride album, it was like going on stage at Lemoore. And suddenly now we're following up a multi-platinum, album, writing songs in 1 week. when we went into the studio, we hadn't even ever rehearsed the songs. I mean, this thing about, preparation for an album is testing out the songs, maybe changing the groove, maybe changing it to halftime, adding something bigger intro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time we listened back to that album, it was already printed. And we would pay a price many places in the world where the press would say this is an unfinished album. And in the many years to follow, even after the band were broken up, this would be Vito's and I conversation. We wrote some phenomenal songs for that album, but that album, we needed a half a year to rewrite, to work it out, et cetera, stuff like that, I mean, I'm sitting there writing Little Fighter, Broken Home, Going Home Tonight, Cry for Freedom. One day, Vito's in the next room working a little bit on the guitar, and then we recording our little 4-track. It's just, it was so wrong. It was so wrong. But what you were leading up to, where are the record company? There is a story that when we were in the studio and Atlantic Records, the big guys from Atlantic came out of L.A., and we, the usual, we turned the lights down in the studio, cranked up the speakers, and one of the guys goes, "Man, this is some of the best I've heard since Led Zeppelin." Then they go out in the car to go back to the hotel, and now one of the other guys says to the guy, "Why you let them do this? Now, why don't they have the balls to come back and says, you know what? We're stopping the recording right now. You guys need a break."
Yeah, because it was a machine.
Yeah, when Big Game came out, Pride was still on Billboard's Top 200.
Yeah, that's crazy. The churn was so crazy. I mean, and you had producers like Michael Wagner, who worked with you guys, who was the sound of all of those bands back then, whether it was Motley or Ozzy or Great White or
Skid Row.
Striper or Skid Row. Did so many of those albums, and the producer is churning as well. When the band ended in '91, and it was very much it was like a lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
those flashes are going, and it was just so incredible. Lightning in a bottle. When the band ended in '91, I always felt that there was so much more gas in the tank for the band.
Well, yeah, you got that right. That's just the way it is, man. I'm almost standing here like in tears. Because the memories of all those years that have passed by and being able to stand here today and being able to go around the world, not just the USA, and knowing that you have been sort of a part of people's life since it came out is almost too much to really, absorb.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift. I said this to Rachel Bolan, who I had on not that long ago. And I said, I am so grateful that all these years later, like when I pulled this photo out, I said, how cool is it in life? I'm so grateful for the opportunity that we did this 30-something years ago, and we're able to do it again now. I mean, that no matter how crappy of a day you're having, when I say something like that, I go, you know what? I feel lucky today. I feel grateful and gifted that I get to see you again and we get to still chat about things. And look, I was probably so starstruck in this photo that I probably forgot to start the tape recorder, because that's what we used to do. They would send us out with a little tape recorder. You're going to Trocadero, White Lion. Oh, I get to talk to Mike Tramp. Oh, I was probably like freaking out. And probably, I don't remember if I did the interview properly or not, but either way, but so grateful that we get to do it again.
Without a doubt.
As seasoned grown-ups now who actually know what the heck that we are doing. So we talked about record company stuff, the blessing and the curses that we talk about too. I think for you, the blessing is that you were in a band that touched so many people. The curse sometimes is everybody's like, do you think you guys will get back together? And you guys have said, look, it's not going to happen. You were able to perform the songs of White Lion, which I think is more than fair. You decided to repurpose them and reimagine them. Songs of White Lion Volume 1 came out. Volume 2 just came out. So when you're going in and you're like, you know what? I'm a more mature deliverer of these songs. Because I always think people can sing something, but when you deliver a song, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's no way that I can walk out on the stage and be Mike Tramp 1988, 40 years later. So I was fighting it for quite a while. I mean, you were mentioning a little before that I have quite a large studio, like a solo career. Probably the largest of any artist from the 80s that were like that. I mean, I have 14 solo albums that are completely consistent with what the first one was that I recorded. Everywhere I went around, White Line were bigger on the poster than Mike Tramp. And it followed me around like a curse over and over. And once in a while, I would play a couple of White Line songs, acoustically and things like that. Always knew that I could, because I'd gone away from that sound of the 80s. Now, all my solo albums is much more like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I mean, it's Mike Tramp, but that's what that is. And an 80s band and a sound doesn't fit in there. But it just, I couldn't get away from it. And I actually attempted to do a version that I was really stubborn about not wanting to do, and it really sort of failed because I couldn't commit to it. Finally, when I said, I'm going to have to look into this, and Marcus Nand, which plays the main guitar, probably the most important thing of recreating the White Line songs, listen to what it was that I wanted to do, because I wanted to sound like who I am today, and I obviously I can't sing as high as I did when I was that young, and I also don't like to. I don't like that sound anymore.
Yeah.
So once we started working on the songs, and I went back into my own studio and I started singing the songs, I realized, first of all, I don't need to have the lyrics. The songs are my DNA. They're in me when I sleep, when I shower, whatever. These songs are there. So I was able to go out there and sort of tell the story of the song in my vocal performance, because I was so secure in the melody line, because I know the song so well. It's probably the best thing that could happen to anybody is singing it. And that's also why the Pride album, because we had played these songs live. I'd sung them in so many different ways. And that's what it's all about now. Now we go out there on stage, and you can't forget that the audience are also 30 years older.
Right.
So if I suddenly jumped out on the stage in a zebra stripes spandex and big hair, people go, what the hell's going on? But yeah. I think that I meet the audience expectation and bring the memories back, because the band is a killer band. We perform the songs very, very, dedicated to the music. We're not trying to sell something that cannot be sold. I mean, we want this also to be, satisfying for us. We're not out here just to make money.
No.
We're out here because
be an artist.
We love that. And Marcus playing all of Vito's guitar parts are completely respecting the master from Staten Island. When he plays that, he's not even putting himself in. He's playing it note for note. We're playing the songs of White Line that Mike Tramp and Vito Bratta wrote. And we're having a great time. And I'm able to tell a lot of different stories in between the songs that makes us just all feel like, man, we have had a great life together, me and the audience.
People make that connection and feel that they know you. I mentioned you guys having more gas in the tank. I never thought that you guys would still take that path, that Pride and Big Game. I always felt that there could have been other roads traveled for White Lion with the way that the musicianship was in the band and the songwriting was. Correct or incorrect?
No, 100%. I mean,
really?
When I ended the band September 2nd, 1991, and I said it to Vito, he just said, okay. And for 20 years, we didn't speak about it again. Now, the biggest question is that when I went back to L.A. and Vito went back to New York after that final show, I would expect it within 1 week, my manager calling, the record company calling, the T-shirt company that had given us $1 million in advance, the publisher, and so on. And even Vito calling and says, come on, man, maybe you're,
we were mad, we got heated, maybe it's not over.
In reality, it wasn't about that. We didn't have an argument. It wasn't because of Vito. We had come in and played the Ritz in New York, like a sold-out show. Nobody from the record company was there. And that, to me, at that moment, told me that there's something wrong. And this is looking from an artist's point, which, thinks with his, wrong parts and get overheated. I can tell you a story that I think the listeners will love. And that is the next day after that, I went up to Atlantic Records. And at that moment, I didn't look the same that I looked in the video. And I go up to the desk and it says, I'm here to talk to Doc Morris. It says, oh, no, he's not available. Well, you tell him Sebastian Bach is here. And then he came out and he looked at me and I turned around and there I made the decision. It says, they have moved on. It might have been a little extreme what I did there, but the thing was just, I wanted it to feel right. And, and also we had re-released Broken Heart, which we had re-recorded on Main Attraction, and Vito and I were very against it. We did not feel we needed to go back in and use our old songs. When that song came out, the whole record company went on vacation. This was yet another, tell us we don't really care about you anymore.
That's a very interesting analogy when you said, you know what, at that moment I felt that it was time to move on.
And then when somebody doesn't, like when a girlfriend or boyfriend says something, hey, if you walk out that door, I'm not coming back, or something like that. And then you walk out that door and nobody's trying to stop you.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Does it mean that there's more gas in the tank? Vito and I could easily have written another 10 albums. And we were already talking about that the band wanted to go much more in the direction of Journey, Kansas, the big prog bands, get a major keyboard player in to get a little bit away from the big Van Halen guitar kind of style. We wanted to get away from being like a better word, so a hair band. And we could have delivered it, but if the support system, which is the record company, the management, all the ones that makes money from us, aren't there, because Vito always said, I thought we were just supposed to write songs and play live, not be accountants, not think about retirement, that's the people we pay for. But they weren't there.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm in tears.
Wow. But, these are all things that I kind of knew, but hearing them from you is just that much more impactful.
To me, it's really, it's not the old days with, you sell millions of records. It's just to go through the process, and also just, it's kind of like you opening old files and you look through them, and you correct a few things, but you hold on to it.
Excellent. Mike Tramp, this has been such a fun hour.
It has for me, too.
Don't forget to like this podcast and subscribe to the Car Stereo page on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to Car Stereo. I'm Rob Moorhead. TC and I will see you next time. I'm Rob Moorhead. TC and I will see you next time.